Do it. Hey, what's going on, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Slanted Attic Experience. Today we have my buddy Pat. Pat, you want to introduce yourself to the crowd that may not know you yet? Pat has not been on one of our episodes before, so this is his grand opening.
Yeah, what's up, everybody? I'm Patrick Ryan. Tyler and I go back a couple years now, and it's a pleasure to be here on the podcast and excited to see what he's kind of building here. And yeah, so I'm Patrick Ryan. What do I do? I'm a commercial real estate banker by day, still working on the what I'm doing by night kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I think that's enough of an intro for you guys for now.
Oh
So
yeah, absolutely, man. And everybody's got to have their hobbies and their things they like to do. That's what I'm doing here, and I've been picking up golf a lot more recently. But yeah, I kind of wanted to segue into something that just started, which is the MLB season. The Pirates. I don't know if you saw what happened today. We should have won our 10th game already. We're 9-3. Went into the top of the ninth. Brought in our closer. He walks the first guy, pegs the second guy, and gives up a base hit. Throwing error from the center fielder to the third. They
oh
scored
geez,
two men. So they tied it up, and then they went ahead. He let in another run, and we ended up losing. But that was our first time winning or going 9-2 since 1992. It's a crazy
dang.
fact.
Are the Pirates going to be good this year? Or
We'll be all right.
yeah,
I think we added a little bit of depth. We drafted Paul Skeens from LSU, who should be
hmm,
nice,
yeah,
but he's still in AAA. But yeah, I mean, we started off really hot last year and had like 76 wins. So as long as we're not losing over 100 games, I would consider that a success because we had like
yeah,
4 years in a row where we lost over 100. So
yeah, yeah. It's nice to at least have a team. I obviously growing up in the DC area, I was an Orioles fan before the Nats came along, and then I ended up jumping on the Nats bandwagon, and have been a Nats fan, and now, you know, I don't follow as much as I used to when I was playing, obviously, but the Nats are going to be terrible this year, and the Orioles are looking really good, and with a stacked farm system. So I might have to make the switch back to being an Orioles fan here
hey
soon.
man, you didn't get on the track at the wrong time. You got to watch a World Series, which was pretty
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Yeah,
it
World
worked
Series
out.
win. Yeah.
Right, and it's nice kind of having both the O's and the Nats, in driving distance where I
Hmm.
love Camden Yards specifically. I mean, I'll take that over Nats Park any day, but yeah, it's tough to watch years and years of losing. So I guess you can kind of pick and choose between the two. That's at least
Yeah.
my plan here. So,
Absolutely, man. Camden Yards is a beautiful ballpark. I was actually at the Phillies Nats game last Friday, and you want to know what game I was at? I've been to Camden Yards once, and it was Orioles against the Red Sox. That was when David Ortiz was playing, and I don't
hmm,
know if you remember that clip. It's a 3-0 count, and as the pitcher's throwing, he kind of throws his bat, and the pitch comes by. He walks to first, and the
hmm,
umpire calls it a strike. I mean, terrible call. It was obviously a ball. He was just pissed at what Big Poppy was
yeah,
doing. And then he rung him up on the next two pitches, and Big Poppy runs back to the dugout, and smashing the
smash the
the
phone,
the
right?
phone, man.
Yeah,
I couldn't
yeah.
believe it. That was so cool.
That's funny. So that was the one Orioles game you've been to, or just the one that sticks out?
No, that's the only game I've been to at Camden Yards, and then I've been to what is
Got
it,
it.
M&T Bank Stadium for the Ravens once as well.
Got it. Got it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I got to go to one playoff game. I probably was the last playoff game the Orioles were in like 2013, maybe sometime around then, maybe even earlier than that. But I'll never forget the one game I did miss. Growing up, we had season tickets there, and
Hmm.
my dad ended up going with I think a client or something else to this one game, and I was planning on going and ended up not going, and that was the game that I think Josh Hamilton hit four bombs. So as a 12, 13, 14-year-old, whatever I was kicking myself because, yeah, I mean, you want to be able to see that. And Josh Hamilton was one of my favorite players for a little while there. So, uh, yeah, besides that, I'm trying to think. Some of my coolest experiences have been I got to go to see a Yankee Red Sox game opening day one time,
Was it in
and
Yankee Stadium or Fenway?
it was at Fenway, and we
Nice.
had first row seats right behind
Oh,
the tarp, and so we got there early, like watched BP. John Lester gave me a ball that he was using to warm up in the bullpen. which was cool. And
Yeah.
I got a couple batting practice balls, and I still have them where they have like the dirt or the grass, I should say, in between the seams on the ball, kind of thing from Fenway. So yeah, it's just a lot of good memories surrounding baseball for sure. Just all the time spent traveling and going to pro games, going to my own games, and long car rides with family and all. So we could probably spend this whole podcast talking about it, but
Oh yeah, absolutely, man. You want to know what's funny? When you were playing travel ball when you were younger, did you guys ever do anything like Cooperstown? Did you ever do like
we
a?
did go to
You did go
Cooperstown.
to
Yeah,
Cooperstown.
yeah, yeah.
My
But
my boss's son is going this year, so it
mhm.
just reminds me. I went when I was 10 and when I was 12. Did you guys go once or twice?
We went once when we were 12, and we put together like a stack team of all the kids from our little league kind of thing. And
Yeah.
uh, I I remember I'll never forget actually we got rained out the whole first day, and it's like a 5-day
Oh,
tournament, and so
yeah.
there's
Yeah.
everyone's coming from all over the country. It's tough to like add an extra day or whatever. So the whole first day gets rained out, and it was like the best thing that could have ever happened. And maybe we'll need to cut this, but the food was horrendous at that park. And so I think our whole team like spent that whole day in the bathroom. So it worked out that the games were canceled because we wouldn't have been showing up for much, even if they were on. So
No way, that's wild. I guess we're
yeah,
the same age. I wonder if we went the same week, dude. That would have been crazy.
we might have. We'll have to go back and cross-reference there because I think we were one of the last weeks, and I can't
Okay.
even remember, 12-year-old year, so something
Mm-hmm.
14 years ago or so.
Yeah, I think the 12-year-old had like 10 weeks or something like that, and then the 10U had 3 weeks. So
Hmm.
somehow we applied for it. It was our 9-year-old Little League All Star team, and we got in for when we were 10. And then they have like the legacy program. So, like, our team went when we were 12, and then my dad and a couple other dads. There were competing markets for travel ball teams in our small ass town, Central
Hmm.
Pennsylvania, and the only two that were available were ridiculously expensive. So my dad and a couple other dads in our area created a team, held tryouts, did that for a couple of years, and created that legacy system. So now they actually what they should have done, they messed up. They should have sold the team to who owns it now. Now they have like 25, 30 teams, softball, baseball, and pro instructors, all this stuff. And they didn't, they gave the rights to it away. But anyway,
Well,
like all those teams have legacy, like one team can go per year because we started it, which I thought was pretty cool.
did you guys do well there, or how'd you get that legacy title? Just
Wow, no, once you go, if your team goes the next year, you get an invitation to the
oh,
following
got
year.
it, got
Yeah.
it, got it.
No, dude, we
Okay,
got we got hammered. No,
that's
especially our
funny.
10 year old year. I mean, dude,
Yeah,
there were kids that were like 6 foot. It was insane. I'm
yeah.
10 years
We
old.
Yeah, we tried to stack our team with a bunch of those guys, and yeah, we did all right. I think we won our pool, and then I think it was maybe the round of 32 or something like that after, and we played a team that was really good from California, and they were like sponsored by a bat company kind of thing, and
Right.
I think they blew us out of the water. So yeah, yeah, it was good
Yeah,
times for sure.
yeah, I remember. I think when we were 10 years old, we played a team called GBC. It was like the Greater Region Baseball Center
Hmm.
Network. I don't know what
Hmm.
it was, and they scored like
Garcia
four.
baseball
Was it?
something. I want
Was
or
that what it
Garcia
was?
Para. It might be Gar. Remember?
Nomar, Nomar.
Yeah, I remember Nomar. Yeah, he had a. I don't know if that's the one, but there was like a Garcia Para baseball club or something like that.
Let's look it up.
It was something like that, but they were always really good. I remember running up against those guys a couple of times at some of the bigger tournaments.
It's GBG, Garcia Parra Baseball Group.
Baseball
So
group,
it
got
must
it.
have been different, but no, these guys first like 3 innings, it was like 14 to nothing. And I remember, and this was still in pool play, so the really good teams would absolutely hammer your local little league teams or whatever, and they'd try to get the most runs scored versus what they gave up. And I remember the third inning, I hit a kid straight in the face, and it knocked out his front tooth, and we scored a run, and we ended up scoring like two more runs. It was like 16-3 was the final score. But I mean,
Yeah.
the coaches were freaking out, like so livid. The kids were all disappointed. I'm like, dude, you guys just hammered us fucking 16-3. You just demolished us, and they were all pissed because they
Right,
didn't want us to score 3 runs against them. It knocked them down like 6 spots in the pool rankings or whatever,
right.
which is crazy. But I mean, going there as a 12-year-old was a totally different experience. We were matched more evenly against teams. We actually won like 3 games or something like that. I hit a dinger. It was a
There you
much
go.
better experience, but we basically got shit on as 10-year-olds.
Yeah, it's funny. It's sometimes that's what those bigger tournaments are almost bound to do. It's tough. They recruit those guys, some of those teams from all over the state or whatever, even at that young of an age, which is
Hmm.
unbelievable. But when it's just your, local little league and things of that nature, it's tough to go up against.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if this is a rumor or actually true, but for the championship game, my 10-year-old year, they said the kid flew in from the Dominican Republic to pitch in the championship game.
Classic, classic, right. I always wonder why my teams never had that guy,
Right?
the guy flying in with the IM-12 birth certificate out of bench warmers.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were always looking for that guy. We actually kind of had a couple folks like it, the 12-year-olds with the mustaches kind of thing.
Right.
Those guys know who they are, so
Yeah, we did have one dude, or actually 2 guys that were above like 5'8", 5'9" at that time, and
yeah.
I was always a tiny kid, right? And I only grew probably junior, senior, freshman year of college, so I was always really tiny, one of the smallest guys going into that, and
Yeah.
those kids had already hit puberty.
That's
So
funny. Yeah. I had the benefit of the doubt. I ended up hitting probably my biggest growth spurt, like sixth, seventh, eighth grade kind of thing, and I didn't grow much after that. So, uh, me looking back, those were my glory days, I think, because I was, virtually the same size and playing on a 200-foot fence,
oh
with big
man,
barrels. Yeah,
yep,
those were good times. So,
yeah.
yeah.
Did you have? I had the red and like off gray stealth, and then I had the I had a combat virus. I don't know if you had
hmm
that. Did you guys
hmm
have those?
I had the like B1 and B2 combats. Those
Yes.
were those were great. And then I had the for big barrel the like drop five orange and black stealth.
Oh,
That thing was like a cheat code. And then there was this Anderson Texzilla bat
yeah, I
that
remember that
was
one too.
like it
Made a
would
crazy
dent.
sound, dude.
Yeah, made a crazy sound. Everybody thought it was cheating, and it would dent like you wouldn't believe. But man, that thing, the ball flew off the bat there.
Oh yeah. Actually, I would like to go back and get like bat speeds versus ball speeds off those little league bats because they changed everything now. I mean, I don't know if the current little league bats are still as poppy as they used to be.
Yeah, I wonder. I know that when I was going through Little League, the BB Core stuff hadn't come out or anything. So it
Hmm.
was literally right when I got into high school that BB Core stuff started happening. So you move up to the, much bigger field, playing against better competition, the older folks, and your bats, cut in half pretty much.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
You end up finding out what kind of player you are and how the hell to get on base if you can't hit it just over people's heads anymore. So yeah,
Yep.
it all worked out, but it kind of helped me figure out I wasn't the home run hitter pretty quick.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember we played. So I played 3 leagues in high school. I played my high school team. I guess I played a little travel too, and then I played. We had a Legion team that was wood bat. I mean, we had a VFW team that was anything goes. So we had a bunch
Yeah.
of Beeser bats left over from the high school kids that had
hmm
graduated before us because yeah, once we got in there, it was the BB core, which was like quite like you said, it's like half the speed coming off the bat. So I hit a couple
Yeah.
home runs
There
over
you
the two
go.
years I played there, but
There you
yeah,
go.
I don't even think I hit one in high school, maybe one.
There you go. Yeah, I think I hit one in high school and I hit one in college, and it was actually the one I hit in college was we were down. It was at what was it? Uh, East Tennessee State,
Hmm.
and somewhere down in Tennessee. I can't tell you exactly where, but um, we were down. I think 15-0, just getting spanked on a Friday night game, and their starter was still in. Normally in college, like your Friday night guy is your best pitcher. Saturday night, your second best, and Sunday, that's kind of like your little starting rotation. Um, we were down 15 to nothing. It was 1-2. Gave me a hanging breaking ball, and I put a good swing on it, and the ball just kind of kept on carrying. It was a turf field, so I had never hit a home run. I had hit one in high school, and hadn't hit one in college. And the left center fence, I think, was 380 out there, and I was like,
Damn, that's a
one
shot.
two, and it was a 1-2 breaking ball. I was like, there's no way that I got it right. So
Yeah.
it ended up going over the fence, but because it was a turf field and because I was just, in shock, uh, I ended up rounding second base and I like stopped for a second thinking it was a ground rule double. And I like looked around and my head coach was like, home run, let's go. And I was like, oh God. So stopped at second base and then ended up making the full trip kind of thing. But I never heard the end of it for that one.
Oh,
So.
I'm sure. Hey, man, you're just taking it all in, right?
Exactly. I was trying to spend as much time out there as I could, and yeah, it ended up being my last home run, so I'm glad I got to soak it up.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, man. That's like the feeling that people don't play sports don't understand. It's like that. It's like hitting a perfect shot in golf, hitting a home run, scoring a goal in soccer, hockey, field hockey.
Right.
I'm trying to think. It's just an exhilarating experience. I mean,
Yeah.
that's what I chase every day when I go to the golf course, man.
Yeah. I can't imagine the retired professional athletes that had lived with that rush and that, just adrenaline high for years and years and years, and that's what you train for, that's what you practice for since you're a kid, and you kind of feed off of it. And uh, I didn't have near that experience just playing college baseball. There's not a ton of people that show up to many of the games, but even in the few bigger games, like it's really tough to replace like the feeling of playing in front of thousands of people and like just that energy. So I can't imagine doing it every night and doing it in front of 40,000 people and then all of a sudden it just stops. Uh,
Yeah.
it's probably leads to a bigger conversation, but probably one of the reasons why a lot of these former athletes have uh, mental health issues or money issues or you name it. It's a huge, huge, huge change.
Yeah, I mean, kind of along with that, we see all this CTE stuff in the NFL. We see ex-NFL players getting arrested for doing stupid shit. And I think you're totally right. It all stems from them not being able to reach that same exhilarating moment that they had experienced for so many years over and over again.
Right,
Grace talks about this sometimes. She's like, I don't know what Jason Kelsey's gonna do, after he retires from football. Well, he's got his podcast with Travis now, which I'm sure will take up a lot of his time. He's going to be a
right.
parent and stuff like that. But not all these guys have those external holds and grips on reality, man, and they end up probably chasing something else.
Yeah, yeah. I think that I'm sure that support system there, and obviously Travis being in the NFL, like they'll be able to lean on each other a good bit. And it sounds like he's got a good family setup at least. And I feel like so much of it is yeah having that next thing to put your time into because a lot of these guys they have the money after they retire. I mean, they could theoretically, sit around and not do much, but you go
Right.
crazy crazy doing that. Going from, doing everything that you were and go 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 to all of a sudden, 100% shut down. It's yeah, that'll mess with you.
Yeah, that's why I'm not surprised as we see a lot of these guys get really good at golf after they retire
Yeah,
from their
yeah.
their respective sport.
Golf's one of those things, man. It's absolutely yeah. It knows exactly what it is in the sense that like it's perfect for that, former athlete or, somebody that's looking for a way to get outside and like still get active and whatnot, or just an excuse to go out with friends. Like it's kind of, in my mind, probably the most versatile sport that there is. I almost wish you started when you were younger. I almost wish I started younger. I probably wouldn't be slicing everything like I am now.
Yeah, man. Well, my first piece of advice: take a lesson.
Yeah,
Do one or two of those, and you're an athlete, right? You'll figure out once you know what you're doing wrong, you'll figure out how to adapt to that. Practice the drills, whatever, when you're out on the course. Yeah, but I mean, I had my first club was a Nike pitching wedge. I had one in my hand when I was like 8 years old, and I loved that thing. And I used to hit it outside all the time. And gradually, as I got older, my dad got me a little USGA junior set of golf clubs, and we went out and played. And I ended up stopping playing in high school. I probably should have tried to play in college, but I had my ulnar collateral ligament injury at the end of my middle of my senior baseball season. So that kind of deflected my hopes of doing something like that if unless I were to do enough PT and get back
Yeah.
into it. At that point, it's kind of a weird period. I guess I could have tried to walk on the golf team, but I had other priorities at that time, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. You're good, man. You definitely could have made a run at it, you know. It's funny too, because I think, the former golfers, the guys that I know, guys and girls that I know that have played golf in college, a lot of them, it seems like, in many of my people I run into in just the business world, a lot of the folks that played golf in college, are like just consummate networkers, like really, really good at networking. It's just like a easy excuse to get out there, and many times they grew up, playing at a golf course around here, or they belong to a club, and it's like an easy ticket to, especially if you're in a transactional role, it's an
Right.
easy ticket to just get out and connect with someone, and one thing leads to another. Just about every rich, older person you'll take out, is always going to have or want uh, to know how you're hitting it so well, or want to get a swing tip or two from you if you're good enough, So it's
Yeah.
a easy foot in the door is what I found.
Yeah, 100%. That's totally true. It's also a very sociable sport,
Yeah,
save for the people that like to go play out solo and do their own thing, which is totally fine too, right? It's golf. There's a lot of ways to play your way around the sport. But yeah, I mean, growing up in that atmosphere, I mean, I can't tell you how many awesome people I've played with in just random foursomes or matching up in high school, playing against random dudes that were really, really good, a lot better
right,
than I was. But
right.
yeah, I mean, you're totally right. It's a very sociable sport, and I mean, I can't really use that in my role currently, but I'd like to be able to use that skill because I
Yeah.
think I'm a good conversationalist, and also pair that with golf. Maybe sales job, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely will come in handy. I'm sure it will, especially as we get older, kind of thing. And I think many roles, if you're not in a sales role, I think many roles kind of turn into a sales or a business development role as you kind of progress and all. So, yeah, I think it's one of those things that ends up working out for you.
Net benefit. Yeah, man. I'll have to talk to you off air about the golf trip in November. I think I texted you about it, but I need to know if you're still interested. But we'll talk about that later.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah.
move on to the Masters this week. Have you watched any golf at all this year? Lots
Pretty
of
much
drama.
none. Pretty much none. I'm not up to speed with much of the drama. I mean, I had been following the headlines with all the live stuff and everything
Mm.
there. I don't know if there's been a resolution to that or what, but yeah, I really haven't gotten a chance to. I've been, heads down quite a bit here the last, 6 to 9 months, and planning a wedding, it takes up a lot of my free time kind of thing. So I wish, but maybe I'll get a chance to start watching here this weekend.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I mean, that's just one of those things that, like you said, takes up a lot of time. Like what I said in the beginning, I'm trying to find new hobbies, take up some of my time, with more productive things in my
Yeah,
day. But yeah, the Masters is going to be a lot of fun this weekend. So basically, what happened is John Rahm signed with Live, and now he's coming out and he's saying, "Oh man, I wish we played these 72 hole events. It's not the same." And everybody on the media side's like, you're the one that signed this contract. You agreed to this deal. You're the one who went and chose to play at this separate tour. And he
right.
got all kind of butthurt about it. And I'm like, dude, what do you want?
Yeah. You already got the check that you were looking for, and did they ever release the size of that check or what? I mean,
I'm not
I
sure.
had
Let me
heard
see if I can look it
rumors.
up.
Yeah, I remember I had heard rumors, but I don't know if it ever came out. But yeah, I mean, talk about getting paid. It's a good time to be a pro golfer, that's for sure.
It does not say. It says upwards of 450 million euro.
Jeez. Yeah, yeah. I wouldn't care how many holes we were playing, what we were playing, where we were playing if I had a check that size. Uh,
Yeah, I mean, all these, these moral warriors attacking these guys that chose to take this paycheck. Yes, I think it's the wrong thing to do morally and ethically, and I think the the Saudis that are back in the live golf situation. That's totally fucked up. But if I were in that scenario, would I not take a $200 million check to provide for my family for the next 50 years and plus my kids? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's a hard argument to say no to.
Oh, 100%. I would be curious to see, just being a finance guy, like what the economics of this whole thing with Live look like. Just because, I mean, yeah, if I'm making, I mean, what were they making? A couple million bucks an event, and
Right.
the top earners at PGA making 10, 15, maybe 20 million kind of thing, and you talk about 400 million, and is it one check? Do you know if it's one check? Is it a
I'm
signing
not sure,
bonus
but
or?
all I mean in the PGA Tour, you got to win to get your money
Yeah,
too. Like in the live,
yeah,
it's guaranteed. All you got to
yeah,
do is show up, dude.
yeah. If it is one check, it's God, I'm sure it's scary to see how much Uncle Sam's taken out of that. Whew.
Yeah, what do you think? 40%, 45%?
Whatever the max is. I mean, I guess it depends, what state you're in, and but whatever the federal max, tax rate is, that, and then depending on what state you're in, it's almost like when you get a check that size, it's worth moving down to Florida or like a zero state income tax, literally just for that year to, save a couple dozen million.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's transition to something that might be a little more up your alley, considering what you just said. I want to talk about current like credit card debt, the current housing market, the current Fed rates. I saw something today that they might consider cutting them, but they might not. Like they're just trying to be sneaky about it. I don't understand. Like, shouldn't they want to cut rates?
Yeah, I'll do my best here.
Yeah, dumb it down for me a little bit.
Yeah, just so I guess I touch one side of this, just being a commercial real estate lender. So we'll lend for, commercial investment properties in the DMV area here. And so obviously interest rates are a big part of my day-to-day kind of thing. And I mean, with all the back and forth, I feel like we've heard, and everybody feels like they're an expert when it comes to what's going to happen next. I mean,
Hmm.
even for the economists that are in this on the day to day, which is not me. These guys don't really have a clue. Everybody's taking a guess. I think if I had that crystal ball and I knew where rates were heading, I would be a lot richer man than I am sitting here before you today. So I mean, I don't know. I think previously it was, as soon as 2024 comes around, the Fed's cutting, the Fed's cutting, the Fed's cutting. That pushed into spring, which pushed into summer. Now I'm hearing, first cut coming in the fall of 24. You went from, I think at one point they might have been predicting at least 5 rate cuts. I know there was 4 at one point. Now they're talking about 3 rate cuts. Um, who really knows, honestly? I think for my job, that's, I'm quite literally quoting interest rates on commercial loans on a day-to-day basis kind of thing. The way we work is I'm quoting on what it is today, and
Right.
there's just too much risk, and it's not the job of any capital provider to be speculating. I mean, you can get into that business, but just working for a publicly traded bank, we're the most conservative form of capital, and we get the lowest return, relative to other capital sources. So, I'm quoting off of where it is today, and if rates drop in the future, great. If they don't, so be it. But uh, things are definitely slower now, and I think everybody's not necessarily accepting the new normal. I think, in the real estate world, buyers are, seeing one thing and hoping for one thing when their banker quotes them 7, 8% on a loan, and sellers are, have their head in 2021, kind of glory days where,
Yeah.
still hoping for that aspirational pricing. So from what I've seen, things just haven't come together yet. There's still that disconnect, and maybe it will take, the Fed cutting a couple times here for things to come back in line. But I think on the longer term, I don't think we ever get back to, and that's my humble opinion. I mean, not for a long time. I don't think we ever get back to, the days of three, low three mortgage rates and interest rates. So um, we'll see, man. But I leave that to the folks that are smarter and higher paid than me to speculate on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd love to see that sometime, like your half of the loan sector, because we deal as a general contractor, we deal a lot with banks and companies that are loaning
Right,
out commercial real estate loans essentially as we build these
right,
buildings. We're
right.
doing a have you been or seen like the Whitewater Rafting Center in North Carolina? It's like a wake lake.
It's not a Great Barrier Lodge or anything like that. Are you familiar with what are those? It's
I
not one of those. I don't think I am, no.
All right, so this is what I'm talking about. I've been here once, but we're building one of these in Chesterfield, right outside of Richmond.
Oh,
And
wow.
okay, excuse me, I shouldn't have said that. We as a general contractor are not building that. We're building retail shell buildings for tenants to move in and like Chipotle, Starbucks. It's a
Around
retail
this,
center. Yes,
around
correct.
this amenity. Got
On the
it.
property. Yep. So currently, I can't imagine what the financing on something like that looks like. I don't
Yeah.
really want to divulge our numbers, but our scope's in the multi millions, right? So I can't imagine that something for this whole entire facility isn't 50, $100 million. So
Oh,
that kind
yeah.
of be wild to see the rates and what's going on that because this has been
Yeah.
in the works since 2016 and they finally got financing.
Interesting. Yeah, it's definitely a tough time to get financing now. I would say between 2016 and now is probably the worst time to get financing, commercial financing. So kudos to those guys for getting it done. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of these kind of honestly funky amenity senators kind of going up in this, and I say
Yeah,
that in the sense that I saw like a an indoor ski lodge that was proposed here in Northern Virginia,
that's wild.
and it's a long, thin building kind of thing, or at least that's what the renderings look like. And it's got like the quote unquote mountain or slope or whatever you want to call
Yeah.
it, and it's all indoors, and so uh, it seems like they're thinking of everything nowadays. You got the
Yeah.
indoor skydiving has obviously become a thing, and
Hmm.
yeah, it's funky. There's a mall in Manassas, Virginia, that's pretty much, uh, it's wouldn't say it's in great shape, but they've even turned like one of the indoor shopping, uh, we'll call it, former store spaces into like an indoor go-kart thing too, which is kind
Yeah.
of funky. So, uh, yeah, as a lot of people getting creative, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's great, man. It's great to see people being creative with those commercial spaces, especially if they have a long lease on a building like that. Um, what I was talking about with Luis yesterday, he's in LA now, and he said what's happening with a lot of these retail and large commercial spaces in downtown LA, because after COVID, everybody started working from home. So a lot of these spaces became empty. People hadn't been using them for office space or retail space or whatever. So he said they're proposing to let them turn into homeless shelters and let homeless people sleep there. And I was like, I don't
Interesting.
have much of an issue with that, right? We need to help solve the problem. It's obviously a super large problem across the United States and even the world, and something that we shouldn't let a fellow human being be subject to, right? But how would you feel if you were an owner of a space like that? People are going to be degrading your property value is going to go to the shitter.
Right.
You won't be able to use it for the next 30 years or depending on how much shit goes on in there ever. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that might be a temporary solution, but I don't know if it's a great one.
That's exactly what I was gonna say is it's definitely not a permanent solution there. And on that point, I mean, I think that the whole affordable housing sector and housing sector just as a whole is kind of looking for what that permanent solution is to making affordable housing feasible. I've worked on my fair share of affordable housing deals. I've looked at some that have been, government subsidized, and I've looked at some that have been privately subsidized. And, you know, I think the biggest thing for a lot of the affordable housing developers is you have to get some sort of community development organization in there as a lender to offer you a below market interest rate. Otherwise, things just don't pencil at, where things are today and with construction costs in your world where they are, where they've risen to, the, ability to build affordable housing has frankly gone out the window if you're trying to make an economic return on it, you know? So
Yeah.
the homeless folks, that sounds, it's great that there's at least, I think with homeless folks, there's a need for a temporary solution as much as, I shouldn't say as much as, but, there's very much a need for temporary and long-term solutions. So it's good to hear that that's been a solution in the near term. But yeah, I mean, if you're a property owner, it doesn't help you pay your mortgage back. And if anything, it probably hurts in terms of anytime you would put uh, dozens of folks into one space and have them, living there, whether they're homeless or not. There's, I'm sure, going to be some sort of upkeep or repair as a result there. So I didn't even know that they were doing that, but I think that market especially is in dire need for some affordable housing solutions. And um, honestly, I think somehow, some way, there's a way to get there. There's enough smart
Yeah.
people in this industry, and putting their mind to this kind of challenge, that I think there will be some sort of equitable solution someday to get there. But I mean, it takes a lot of subsidy, that's for sure, and a lot of help on behalf of the government. So
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there are enough people in this world that can work together on something like that. Problem is, will we ever be able to conglomerate and do something like that? I think,
yeah,
especially with the, what's a good word for this? The excessive exponential growth of social media in the past 10-ish years. We're seeing people be more angry than ever before, more withdrawn from society, more depressed. So that's the only thing that concerns me. I think to your point there is if we can actually create a medium for these people to meet and create a forum for a platform for a discussion for something like this. And that's kind of why I wanted to do this podcast. You know,
right,
I know a lot of people that have a lot of different opinions than I do, that are more intelligent, smarter in different areas of work in their brain, right?
right,
Left brain, right brain, whatever. And I think that's very valuable input to have from somebody that you're trusting to have a conversation to put online, right? I think it's,
yeah,
very interesting to hear what other people have to say in certain regards to certain matters and stuff that's going on. It's not okay to stifle somebody's opinion just because you don't like it.
right, right. I mean, it's important, I think, for folks like yourself, and for this to be a thing, right? Having a platform like this for people to just talk about whatever and kind of, spread their 2 cents, and give their opinions, and spread a little bit of knowledge, and hopefully we can all kind of learn from each other. And ultimately, I think that's typically a winning strategy is, taking a little bit of everybody, taking the best of everybody, and trying to, put it into your own thoughts, and uh, you know, digesting and learning that way is, to me, it's always worked. So,
Yeah, absolutely. It's an incredible thing to do. I kind of wanted to pick your brain more about this thing I was talking to Luis about in downtown LA, because after COVID, a lot of these retail businesses and commercial spaces left. What do you
hmm
think is the what do you think is a solution to get more people back in these office spaces? Are we going to have to become more creative and transformative in what we decide to put in a commercial space? I mean, also that has to do with like zoning requirements and code stuff too. I don't
right.
really care about that. Let's say that goes out the window. What would you do to implement people to get back into these spaces?
Yeah, it's a tough and obviously multifaceted question, just because, if a tenant or a company doesn't have a need to be in the office and have office space,
Mm-hmm.
uh, then it's not their problem. The problem is a citywide and economic development issue for, a lot of these downtown CBDs. So looking at it from, just the lens of how do we make it so that these, downtowns and metropolitan cities don't just, fall in on themselves. Um, I wish I had an answer because again, I would be a richer man than I am sitting here today. But I think there's going to be some need for, companies requiring employees to get back to work. Again, if a company doesn't need to go back to work and they don't feel like their employees need to be in work, you know, I don't see any need for them to require
Yep.
employees to do so. So it's not their, they don't need to worry about paying the mortgage. It's the building owner. For cities, I think, in my world, we hear it all the time about just, conversion to multifamily, office to resi, has become a huge thing. Uh, you know, the the general contractors of the world would know it better than me, but I mean, these things just really don't pencil 9 out of 10 times on most buildings, doing that sort of conversion. So, in a perfect world, that would be it, changing uses kind of thing. But
Mhm.
again, changing uses is oftentimes extremely expensive, and not to mention, the entitlement and zoning issues that you have to go through, which are, very, very delayed at many times with many locales and cities and whatnot. So I think, again, from the city perspective, I think speeding up the entitlement rezoning process, I think, is huge.
Yep.
The speeding that piece up, I would say, uh, trying to come up with some sort of programs to subsidize some of these conversions because again, they don't pencil. And why would a developer go in there and try to, turn office to apartments
Right.
if they're going to lose money doing it and they're going to go through the hassle of, doing all the renovation and construction work. It doesn't make sense if you can't deliver a return, and how are you going to raise capital if you can't deliver a return that, investors are looking for? So, um, the easiest answer is, subsidies and, uh, you know, improving the entitlement and zoning process so that, folks can get these things rezoned quicker, or, get to, just on the housing front, getting to build more housing faster and not having to go through a 2 year entitlement process just to get
Yeah.
shovels in the ground.
Yeah, and I'm sure some other people would speak on this a little bit better than I can, but for these large commercial buildings, it doesn't follow residential like code requirements for housing. It follows commercial, so there's a lot more need for fire sprinkler stuff, life
Hmm.
safety, egress plans for everybody to get out of the building if there's a fire. Not that there's not already in commercial spaces, it's just a lot more tedious and constricted once you get multifamily complexes into the mix there. I
Yeah.
don't want to speak out of turn or out of fashion, right? I don't know all of these code requirements, but I know for a fact that they are stricter than your standard residential. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a threshold that they have on things like that. And like what you said, it takes 2 years to turn something around to change the building type for something like that. How can we how can we implement a fast solution to something when the permit process takes 2 years? You have to apply to something that is sitting behind 60 or 70 other things that are in the city's queue because they don't have enough people, to work in the city department to run through all this stuff. I mean, I see it all the time in the
Right.
city of Richmond here. We're doing, permitting water, water stuff, water utilities, wastewater utility stuff, and I have to go there in there all the time, and they're completely understaffed and probably underpaid as well. So,
Right. Right. Yeah,
yeah.
I see the financing side of it, so again, I can't speak to the, some of the just different nuances to different codes and whatnot, kind of thing. But, imagine and with a bridge loan or a construction loan, on the commercial side of things, those are typically higher interest rates than your standard stabilized cash flowing, apartment deal. So think about, a 2 year entitlement process. You're carrying a nine, sometimes higher, 9% loan for 2 years. If it's a big project, that's a lot of money. If it's a $10 million loan, for example, I mean, that's, 900,000 a year you're paying at 9%. So that's, 1.8 million for 2 years for, some simple math there that you lose in carrying costs that goes to the bank. So that that definitely, puts some pressure on margins there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I don't ask you too direct question about your work specifically, but I guess it would be a risk factor as to how you adjust that 9%. Say this project you know is going to take 2.5 years. Would you consider putting a lower interest rate on that because you know you're going to get that return in the future? Without like too much information, I'm just kind of interested on how that works.
Putting a lower interest rate coming from the bank, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the bank is worried about what our return is today. So there's no free money. If you
Yeah.
want a loan, it's market rates. So there's never, even if it's a great asset and there's a borrower that's going to knock it out the park and has done that dozens and dozens of times. At the end of the day, we're a business. We have shareholders that are our investors, and if everyone else is putting out debt, putting out capital at 8%, it takes special circumstances to put out debt at something lower than that. And there are certain instances, but at the end of the day, it does have to make a return. And so, um, typically, what I'm seeing borrowers, just generally, and not even in my day to day, is just, you know, people want a floating rate right now because people think interest rates are coming down, so they don't want to fix your loan. So
Hmm.
you don't want to fix the interest rate on your loan, I should say. So that's kind of one of the levers I think that you could pull. If I was a borrower, that's kind of what I would be looking to do is, try to get some sort of floating rate that, has a decent floor on it that's, not too close to the starting rate and, kind of just hope for rates to come down sooner than later. But in terms of banks right now, there's never really a time where, or a situation where, if there isn't some other thing like, maybe there's a big deposit relationship or something like that, typically you won't put out capital at a lower than market interest rate.
Right. And I mean, why should you? As a large bank that's publicly traded, you got to deliver that shareholder value at the end of the day.
That
I thought that was
shareholder
a
value.
I thought that was a
Yeah.
great answer, by the way. I just want to commend you on
Boom.
that.
There
Very,
you go.
very good, very professional. I do want to ask though, or kind of clarify something that we got into talking to probably half an hour ago at this point,
Yeah.
and it was the Fed rates, right? Can you explain to everybody what happens if the rate goes up, what happens if it comes down, and who does it benefit to either side of that?
Yeah. So the Fed controls the federal funds rate, and that today I think is right around like 5.25 or 5.5 or so. Ultimately, without getting too much into the specifics, that Fed funds rate affects the whole world of interest rates. It affects, what banks can borrow at. It affects, you name it. And so if you look at it that way, if a bank is borrowing at a lower interest rate, they can go lend out at a lower interest rate. You wouldn't believe it, but banks typically will borrow a lot to fund loans, and if they're not borrowing, it's through, deposits that are at the bank, obviously. So if rates go up, I think there's not really a ton of folks who benefit. Technically, you would think that banks would benefit, but as we've seen over the last couple of years, a bank's loan portfolio will have a mix of fixed and floating rates there. So if a bank, and typically a smaller or more aggressive bank that's looking to grow, is typically fixing their rates, especially when rates are at 3 and 4%, borrowers are looking for a fixed rate rather than a floating rate and taking that interest rate risk. So you end up with a bunch of 3 and 4% rates where, obviously interest rates have skyrocketed over the last couple of years. Um, Commercial loans, luckily, are not 30-year terms like residential, so they're typically 5 to 10 years. But
Okay, I
even
didn't know that.
then, yep, even then, you have a commercial loan for 5 years, there's a lot that can happen. In 2021, you got your 3% rate, for instance. Well, today, the bank is paying you, what's the bank paying you on your savings account? 4.5, 5%, right? So if you think about it, the bank still has a portion of loans that are paying them 3%, we'll call it. And now they're having to get new deposits. They're going to have to pay 4.5, 5% today. You see how that doesn't make sense. You're getting 3% coming in, you're paying 5% going out, right? So I think ultimately, for many banks, interest rates coming down will actually benefit them. It will make some of their treasuries and their securities portfolios look better. Uh, Banks, without going too into it, will make loans into the community and to, to businesses, and then they'll buy securities. And those are the kind of, two main places they'll put assets. And so if you bought securities, those are, government bonds or treasuries. They're fixed yields. And so if you bought, X amount a couple of years ago yielding 1.5%. Well, for you to sell those today, you have to what's called mark to market them, and ultimately you can take big losses that kind of flows to the income statement that don't look pretty. So, um, banks want to be able to have these securities sort of mature and live, go through their duration without having to sell them beforehand. So that's long-winded, and I'm sure there's pieces of that are better than others, but I think most people will benefit with rates coming down, and the folks that will benefit from rates going up are, you know, hard money lenders or debt funds where some borrowers will still need money to make a project work. And, if you're the lender, if you're solely putting money out like a debt fund rather than a bank, you'd rather take 13% than 11% kind of thing. But it puts a lot of strain on the market, and I think that, you know, there already is a lot of strain on the market, and so if rates were to increase much more than where they are now, I think, you'd start to see some cracks, and it could be argued that you already are kind of seeing some cracks. So we'll see. I think everybody, stands to benefit from at least staying where we are, and if not, cutting rates here as we get closer to, summer, fall 24.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, I got to get you on with one of my other buddies, Jason, and then Bruce. You've met Bruce, right?
Yeah, yeah,
You three got to talk about the stock market and the real estate market and all of that stuff. I mean,
yeah.
both him and my other friend Jason, who actually recorded a podcast episode, they're huge into it. They like reading all the charts and all that fun stuff, which I know nothing
Right,
about, but I'd love to be a fly on
right.
the wall for that kind of conversation.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'll do my best to hang with those guys. No promises, but I'm just a lousy banker, So, yeah, it's interesting for me to read about all that stuff too. I wish I could spend more time on sort of the stock market and some other things that aren't, revolving around my day to day. But, I'm pretty passionate about real estate. I love, learning about it, being around it kind of thing. And it's a cool industry because you're able to, the people aspect and the social aspect is so big in our industry that, you don't have to settle for being tied down to a desk or being in a sales role. You kind of get a little bit of both in many of those roles. So, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
happy to tag along for a part two here if I did okay on the first one.
No, man, it was phenomenal. I do have one more question probably before we wrap it up. We're coming to a good
Yeah.
time. I don't know if I'm keeping you too long or whatever.
No, this is perfect. This is perfect.
So, credit unions, regional banks, there's federal banks, and then there's large private banks. Does that sound about right? Or there are different groupings of things? Can you walk me through that a little bit?
Yeah, there's credit unions, there are private banks, which are typically, smaller and will eventually be publicly traded.
Mm-hmm.
Most banks are publicly traded just as a function of, it's the most efficient way for a bank to kind of operate is to be publicly traded and more access to liquidity and so on and so
Sure.
forth. But I would kind of within that tranche, public banks, there's the community banks, which are smaller. There's the regional banks, which are, your 10 to 100 billion in assets, depending on who you ask. And then, the power players, the money center banks are, those 100 billion plus and 500 billion plus even. So yeah, they all really operate in sort of different aspects of the market. I mean, as a community banker working at a smaller publicly traded bank, we're not running up against the PNCs of the world as much, or the Wells Fargos of the world. And I think credit unions have a lot stricter underwriting parameters, so they're not as involved in the commercial space and not as competitive, I found. Um, in real estate specifically, it's sort of those community and regional banks that really, run the gamut, which, as I'm sure you see in the headlines, everybody says is the worst thing ever, and everybody's over concentrated in this, that, and whatever. Um, I think it's very much case by case, but yeah, there's credit unions, there's publicly traded banks, there's privately traded banks, there's debt funds, there's private equity funds that will do mezzanine and debt financing, as well as you name it, all along what we'll call the capital stack there. So yeah, a lot of different forms of financing, and I think that it's important, and especially the more, experienced, sophisticated players just in real estate and in just the corporate world, uh, you want to know who to reach out to for different needs that you have, because each of them kind of has a different sweet spot. So,
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think for our next podcast, I'm going to have to do some research and present some stuff to you because you've been given very, very detailed and sophisticated and complete answers. So
yeah,
I really appreciate that. It helps
yeah,
me kind of understand the underlying aspect of what's going on, as well as how it functions, what are needs and wants of these different things that you're talking about, and kind of it helps me understand the whole picture, which is super cool.
yeah,
Um, Come
yeah.
to somebody that I have no real estate, no financial experience. I mean, I took what an economics class in college, but
Right. Right. Well, hopefully I did a decent job explaining. I think it's something that I enjoy, and I think it's very easy to get into the weeds on, which, I think is obviously it's a good thing to know, but in terms of, explaining it and formatting it for the podcast, I'm sure there's some pieces that could be tweaked and could not, kind of thing. So,
yeah.
glad to hear that it sounds like it was at least somewhat helpful.
Yeah, I mean, my whole goal, my hope is for somebody that is not as experienced in the industry, like me, I can ask those broad topic questions that will help me and others understand more about your specialty, your niche subjects that you love to talk about. I would
Right.
like to get more into it. I want to learn more about it. I mean, it's super interesting stuff to learn about. I mean, money drives everything, man. Like, you might
Right.
as well know what it's doing in your pocket, right? So,
Right, right, right. No, I totally agree. It's kind of touches everything, and it's important to at least have a grasp for sort of what's what. You don't need to be an expert in any of these things, but having a general idea, and I kind of think that with everything, having
yeah.
enough of a clue, just enough to be dangerous, kind of thing, I think is something that's worthwhile. And you kind of get a little bit from here and there and whatever, and you figure out what you like, what you don't like, what makes sense for you, what doesn't. So, yeah, I think it's a testament to having podcasts and platforms like this, where you can kind of get that taste from different folks, different opinions, try to figure out what's what, kind of thing.
Yeah, man. And as we kind of progress and move on, and I schedule you for another one, you'll have a relative understanding of what we did in this one, right? And I think that's
Yeah,
only going to help us build up more and more until we can have an incredibly fluent and thoughtful conversation. I know I'm still stuttering a little bit, and sometimes I fail to form my thoughts a tad, and
no,
I transgress into something else a little bit quickly. I talk way too fast. That's my thing that I'm trying to work on, but.
we're always moving up, man. We're always moving up. I don't have the voice for podcasts or audio in general, so I hope folks can bear with me there in my nasally voice. But no, I think that honestly, I'm excited to see some of these podcasts coming out for you, and I'm sure that each one will be better than the next. And I'm excited to kind of see, what things look like here, and happy to join again when it
Yeah.
comes time.
Absolutely, man. Well, I want to thank you for coming on here, and I'm really excited for the next one that we do and everything yet to come.
All right, brother. All right, brother. Well, I appreciate you having me on, and it was fun.
All right.